Before you begin your final project, I would recommend trying out some blending techniques on one of your smaller pieces of spare paper that I sent home. You can begin by, I'm just going to draw some simple shapes on here in pencil, and then I'm going to practice a few different blending techniques with the watercolor pencils. Once you sketch everything out with the watercolor pencil, you can add a little bit of water to help with the gradient transitions, which ends up being really neat for the finished project. So I'm just going to add in some different shapes here, just to kind of figure out how my hand needs to move to fill in those different gaps. And I'm also going to, notice these aren't perfect, I'm also going to practice a gradient with one color and a gradient blending into another color so that you get some variation there. Okay, so I have about 6 fairly large shapes on here. And you should have a sharpener in your bag. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to test out just one singular color. I'm going to do that with black. And I'm going to make one side dark, and then I'm going to gradually blend into the point here, which is going to end up being my lightest space. So instead of outlining the whole thing, I'm just going to press nice and dark on my starting point. And when I want to get a nice bold dark line, I'm going to hold up close to the tip of the pencil. And I'm going to press nice and hard. I'm going to go over that same spot a couple of times too, so I'm laying down a lot of color. This will also help once I go to spread out the color with the water. It'll have a lot of color to begin with. So then as I move down closer to the other corner of the triangle, I'm going to move my hand back just slightly to remind myself not to press as hard. And I'm going to work on adding another layer of color, only this time not going to press quite as hard. I can go over that a second time. So I went from dark, dark to kind of a medium dark. And as I move down toward the top of the triangle there, I'm just going to keep pressing a little bit less intensely. Notice I'm shifting the paper around as I go. That's just so that I can get a comfortable angle for my hand. And I'm moving back, not pressing quite as hard. And I'm not even going to add any color in the very tip of the triangle there. And I can do a few passes just to blend it together, using more of the side of my pencil as opposed to the very tip. Pressing a little harder as I get toward my starting point. Now, normally I would not add water until I have gone over every every shape, but I want to show you how the watercolor pencil works. So when you're blending, you just need a little bit. I'm going to dip the very top of my brush in. I'm going to start in the darkest area, and you can see those colors coming together. And I'm going to work that color from my starting point. I'm kind of flicking it out. I'm going to rinse my brush off in the water, and now I'm going to start from my lightest point and work my way to that dark area. That way I'm not pulling too much color into my lightest spot. And then in points of transition, I can kind of go back and forth to get that blend to work a little bit better. So right here, I can blend a little bit more where it's really, really dark so that I get a nice gradual transition from dark to light. So if I'm wanting to do something around, instead of going from one side to the other, on something that's round, you might want to have something that's dark all the way around the edge that gradually gets lighter toward the center. So for that, same type of technique, only this time I'm going to go around the entire shape. And I'm going to go from red to yellow. So it's going to be really dark around the edges. So I'm going to give that another nice thick layer of color. And I'm going to hold up close toward the point of my pencil and lay some more color down. Again, feel free to turn your paper as you're working so it's more comfortable for your hand. I'm still pressing pretty hard, but just slightly lighter as I go toward the center. And I'm going to pull up on my pencil and press down less and less as I go in. Now, once my red fades out, I'm going to start adding in orange. I'm going to start lightly where I overlap. And then as I go toward the center, I'm going to add more and more orange. This will also kind of give the illusion of dimension to your work. Press really hard and work my way out, pressing a little gentler. Okay, so now I'm going to get my brush wet. And I'm going to go from orange into the red. Rinsing my brush off. And blending those colors as I go. And you get a very nice controlled painted look. With the blending. The thing I like about watercolor pencil too is after this dries, you can always go back and add in more color if needed. Now it's going to look better on your drawing paper too because this paper is a little thinner, so it can't hold quite as much liquid. Okay, I'm going to show one more. I'm going to go ahead and do a nice straight shape here. And here I'm going to go from yellow to green to blue. So I'm going to start with my yellow, press nice and hard on one end. Let up on my pressure a little bit. Then I'm going to work in some green. pressing lightly at first, going a little bit darker, and pressing a little bit harder. I'm gonna go in with my dark green, nice and dark. Add a little bit of that into the lighter green up here. And since my blue is going to be my darkest color, I'm going to press pretty hard at the very end. Pressing as hard as I can. Pressing just a little lighter, and then working my way into the green. Okay, so now I can take my water. I'm going to start on my lighter end first and blend that yellow into the green. A little bit more water there. Go back and forth a little bit to get it to mix. Blend the light green into the dark green. And then lastly, work that dark green into the blue. And if you get a nice clean brush, you can work those colors back and forth a little bit to ease your transitions. Here I got a little too much green, so I just got a wet, clean brush and blended that in together. So I can go from my lightest light to my darkest dark with a lot of variation in between. This is where it's really helpful to reference the color wheel, looking at your three primaries and seeing which two colors blend together to make a new color. Anytime you're mixing two primaries that make a secondary, when you're blending, you'll have nice variations that don't end up turning kind of muddy colors. So that's something to think about. So I would go ahead and practice a couple more colors, a couple more types of gradients, and then you can start thinking about what colors and what types of blending you want to use for your final project.